from everybody's right to left, we have Colin Hanks, Kevin Spacey, Liza Johnson, Michael Shannon, Alex Pettyfer, and Johnny Knoxville. So just a couple of
Well,
photos
hold your
quickly, and then
applause,
we
Jesus
ask you-
Christ.
Yeah, they're too busy twittering. Tweeting.
With this microphone, I just,
Okay,
I
great.
feel
So we all
compelled
just
to
need to
say,
take a seat so
and
we
with the
can
first
start
pick
with
in the NFL
questions.
draft, the Los Angeles Rams select.
We need to start with some questions.
Let's get ready to rumble.
Thank you. Okay, so we right here,
Picks or it didn't
keep
happen?
in shape.
Sure. Hi. Just a terrific film. I felt like I was back in screwball comedy heaven. It's just so delightful. And I wonder for Kevin and Michael if you could both talk about the process that you went through to do these two iconic American figures for the movie. Thanks.
Well, it was really challenging for me because there's not much about Elvis out there, so I really had to do some digging, you know. No, I just started by watching the films, both the narrative films and the documentaries. That's the Way It Is, Elvis on Tour. I watched press conferences, much like this one, particularly one he did in Houston, which predates this movie by a few months, or the events in this movie by a few months. And I found that one particularly enlightening. I also had a great gift from Jerry Schilling that Alex plays in the movie. He gave me a 45-minute interview that Elvis had recorded for Elvis on Tour, which they didn't wind up using in the movie at all. So it's an interview that not many people have heard. And I'm, as all these people will attest, listen to it constantly. I was either doing a take or listening to that CD, pretty much. And that's my exciting story.
Kevin, how did you prepare?
Well, Johnny, it started with me. Weirdly, I had a kind of previous experience in attempting to play Richard Nixon when I screen tested for Frost Nixon, which is, by the way, I will just point out, a movie I did not get.
What?
So
This is really a revenge thing.
this is my revenge film. But because at the time Ron Howard, even though he ultimately did choose Frank Langella, who'd done the stage for it, he asked a number of actors that he was interested in seeing if we could go on tape and present a Nixon. So I was in Las Vegas shooting a movie, and in the hotel room there, and with my makeup and hair people on that film, sort of put together a version, and then I filmed like 4 scenes, including the farewell to the White House staff. And then I thought I lost this DVD. I thought it was gone. But anyway, I located it when I knew I was going to come on to this film, and I was able to watch what I did wrong in that. Some of the major reasons why I didn't get that role were very clear to me as I watched it all these years later. And I thought, well, you're not going to do that again. But it was actually very helpful, and yet, I think Michael and I both, you know, these are two figures who obviously people know so much from the way they presented themselves, and there's so much public stuff, but not that much private stuff. I found the recent documentary that used a lot of footage, sort of behind the scenes of Nixon at the White House that Haldeman shot, and I think Our Nixon is what it was called. I found that very helpful. Also, a lot of photographs of Nixon just looking remarkably uncomfortable in chairs.
Tough to do.
Yeah, that I found very useful, and then of course, obviously, the many hours and hours of tapes of private conversations that I found. That P was really excellent, wasn't it? Of private conversations.
That's what they call it, right?
Yeah, that's right. That I found very helpful because this was a private meeting, even though the photograph became quite public. And that was interesting to me to try to understand what Nixon was like in private. And I came away feeling that he swore more than any human being I've ever heard on tape. And he was decidedly grumpy. Something was always fucked up. Someone was always trying to get in, you know. There was some. So I think, you know, Michael and I both didn't want to feel like we had to do an imitation in any way, but just try to find an essence of each of these figures, and then allow them to respond to each other genuinely. And I think what was most interesting was the fact that these two people you wouldn't think would have anything in common, actually by the end of this meeting had a sort of an appreciation for each other.
Well, I was actually going to ask you something along those lines. Obviously,
Well, then don't, for God's sake. Don't make me repeat myself.
No, I'm not. But why do you think that people are so fascinated by this meeting between two so different, and that's such an odd couple to get together? And I mean, obviously the photo is iconic, but the story is a little bit, it's more of an urban myth. Did you know anything about what had happened before?
No, I was 13 when Nixon resigned, so I wasn't. Do you?
I was actually born the week before this meeting, but I I was, but I mean, I think that the script, when I received it, actually does get at why people are so fascinated by that photograph. To me, it's because, you know, both of those men are so iconic and so well known, but for radically different things, right? Like if Elvis is known for, you know, defining a rock and roll youth culture, for being as cool as shit, right? Like, and Nixon is, I think, a super effective president. He has a huge fan base. People are incredibly interested in him. He is not known for being cool as shit, do you know? And I think that even just the not only in their personal style, like what they're each wearing in that photograph, but also what they're known to stand for in American culture is very dissonant. And just the juxtaposition, even within the photograph, has an absurdity to it that I think is then drawn out and explored by the script that we all got.
You know, somebody said something to me interesting the other day. They said, "Yeah, I didn't know Elvis was so conservative. I didn't know is that true?" And I said, well, first of all, Elvis never talked politics with anybody. He didn't think it was anybody's business what his politics were, and he didn't think it was his place to instruct people on politics. He was a singer. But it's also, I think it points out a really interesting trait in Elvis, is that Elvis is always incredibly aware of who he's talking to. And he is willing to have whatever conversation the other person wants to have. And I think one of the real charming things about it is to see Elvis meet this man who is perennially grumpy and actually coax him into having a semi-decent time for a couple of minutes, you know? Right. So I think maybe that's what's so interesting about it.
And don't forget your karate moves.
My karate moves,
right.
Which Johnny was my trainer on those. It was a quick session. We got it worked out.
You want me to show the president my karate moves?
Yeah.
What is going on?
Okay, I have a question regarding the production. This is for Liza and Johnny. I've noticed over the past, there's quite a bit of references in regard to like film clips, archival, press clippings and whatnot about the meeting itself. And I noticed in the film a lot of the dialogue was actual conversation. There was a mockumentary, I guess, back in 1997, that someone else did called Elvis Meets Nixon, which is exaggerated. But in this production, did you ever think of a time, or did you impose any sort of embellishment of the account, or want to throw something else into it to add some more drama or humor to the production?
There was a dog, but we cut it.
Really? You're kidding me, right?
I am kidding.
Well, Kevin came up with some really good buttons on some scenes. Mm-hmm. A lot of the buttons you see on the scenes in the Oval Office are things you came up with. What was that
I'm
one
a
about?
button man. That's
Yeah,
what
yeah.
I call him.
Yeah, to hear him swear as Nixon was very satisfying. But we didn't have to add too much to the story because the story is so bizarre. Of the truth of what happened is so insane that we just were true to the story. Now, Eliza would allow us to go off book, take or two, but you stay true to the story.
Most of that stuff's cut out of the movie.
Yeah,
Johnny.
yeah.
Oh, but the cool cat one with you dropping the gun.
Oh, yeah, that's
That
right.
was-
That's right.
That's you.
But also
earned
the-
it, you earned it all that day.
The thing also is that while this is such a famous meeting, it wasn't recorded. And so, in a way, it allowed us, and certainly the screenwriters, to be able to imagine what a lot of this conversation was, although the character that Alex plays was there and sort of in and out of the room, as was the character that you play. And so they were helpful in terms of snippets, but I think it was expanded in terms of, and that's sort of been the fun of it, is that we could imagine it.
Yeah, you kind of want to see Elvis give a karate demonstration in the Oval Office. You want to see it.
Yeah,
Did it happen? You still want to see it.
still want to see it.
And I think also that's one of the things that is beautiful about fiction and that you can do through drama, right? And there could be like, if I was a detective, I could make a certain version of everything that we know to be exactly true at what minute, like that. And that would have a certain kind of truth value, right? And then there's other things that we know that are emotionally true, right? Like we know a lot about Jerry's friendship with Elvis that we were able to study actually with Jerry Schilling and through his book. And like, I believe that there are some relatively small changes in time frame and things like that that we decided to put in this movie in this time frame, right? So like if we leave that out of the movie, does that make it more true or less true? Because we know those things are emotionally true, right? So if we're like, that happened on Thursday, and so that can't go in the movie, does that make the movie more true or less true?
For Kevin Spacey, you have here.
Oh, hi.
You have already a history playing presidents of the United States. I don't
Yes,
know-
I'm only ever going to play presidents from now on.
Yeah, great to know, because I want to ask you if which ones of the race we have now would you be willing in the future maybe you would prefer to play, and also if after all this you feel more interested in politics or you just don't want to hear about it.
I've always been interested in politics. No particular election has put me off politics. I think some elections are more amusing than others. And you know, I'm all for the entertainment factor. I love a good laugh. And I very much enjoy doing House of Cards. It's an incredible job to have. I wouldn't want to play any of the current people running for office. I think that would be bad casting. However, now that I look at you,
Stop. Stop. Don't finish the sentence. Hillary. I'd play Hillary.
no, I think Cruz. You could be Cruz.
Cruz?
Yeah, you
Oh.
could be Cruz.
Oh,
you know.
jeez.
Little orange makeup and
A lot of orange
a
makeup,
lot of orange.
Yeah,
which is also
out of
very
your face
popular.
with tang.
Yeah.
Hi, good morning. What I found interesting about the film is how Elvis doesn't want people to think he's famous, but yet he does use his celebrity to get in to meet Nixon. So to broaden the question, have any of you used your celebrity in any way to get something that you've really wanted? And what have you done?
Aside from dinner reservations?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we're all guilty of trying to get a better table at a restaurant. But that's about as far as I feel comfortable going. And even that's like ripping a Band-Aid off. I do it very slowly, painfully. Hi, just wondering, can we, table for two? It'll be at the bar, that's fine, that's fine. That's it.
I used to walk up to Broadway theaters when I was starting out and broke and wanted to go see a play. And because I had been doing stand-up comedy and I did a Johnny Carson impression, I would pretend at the box office to be Kevin Carson. Oh, I don't make this up. There's 2 tickets under my name. And the most surprising thing is I usually got in. They usually would like, and I was, yes, someone from The Tonight Show sent this up at NBC. I'm supposed to see them. And it was always early previews, and they wanted the house to be filled, so they'd give me tickets. And I used to, so in a sense, I used Johnny Carson's celebrity to get into theater.
A complex matrix, actually. The combination of Carson and the early previews. That's a very diabolical plan. I don't know.
I did not know that. Who knew?
Well, speaking of late night talk show host, I'm just glad that I got on Letterman before he retired. That's about it.
Nice transition. Good times.
No?
Never? Okay. Congratulations on the film. I think it's really marvelous coming from that generation way, way back. I remember I was part of the counterculture, and I hated Nixon, let me just be plain, and I didn't like Elvis. And so what you brought...
Well, you went into this movie really wanting to see it.
What you brought to this was you humanized both men for me. And it was absolutely superb. I really, really enjoyed the humor, the irony, sardonic, absolutely absurd, and wonderful. And the private moments I thought that exposed were just great. So the question is, have you shown it to the Nixon family and the Presleys, and do you plan to?
We've invited them all to a screening together in a tent, but they haven't said yes. But we're hoping.
Do you know what I want to read? This is not an answer to that question exactly, but a friend of mine told me that in the John Dean biography, there's a chapter about this San Francisco theater company, the Coquettes, did a piece called Trisha's Wedding. And apparently in the John Dean biography, all of the Nixon boys gather to analyze how to respond to the Coquettes piece, Trisha's Wedding. And if we could organize something like that, I would really be happy.
Yeah. I'd like to be in the Coquettes if that goes on.
I think you're in.
Yeah.
No, well, he's not with us right now, but Jerry Schilling, who Alex plays in the movie, has kind of shepherded this project along. And it was very sensitive for him. He's been asked over the years to be involved with projects about this subject, and he's always declined. The one you mentioned earlier, he is not a fan of. But when he got on board and kind of gave us his support, and he was there on set every day, that meant a lot. I don't know if Priscilla has seen it yet. I was in Jerry's car driving around Memphis with him, and his cell phone rang, and it was Priscilla calling from London. And he's like, "Yeah, I'm sitting next to Mike. He's gonna play, And I was one of the more surreal experiences of my life. But I don't know if she's seen it yet or if she will see it. Obviously, it's hard for her.
I was concerned, actually, just because some of the more comic moments came into the public first through the trailer, and I thought that it might not. I thought that was fine for the public, but just for the people who really have a stake in the representation of Elvis or Nixon, I thought, I wonder how that will be. And I don't know if Priscilla has seen that or whatever, but I do know that some of the people at Graceland saw it, and their favorite scene was, in a way, the most absurd. So I don't know, and of course people really do deserve to have whatever response is their true response, and I honor, respect, and hope for the best on that front, but I was encouraged by the fact that they could endure the most absurd moment and actually like it,
Which is?
in the trailer, there's a scene, you've all seen the movie, right? So I'm not hiding anything to say that there's a karate element, and then there's a little bonus at the end of the karate element that involves the knuckles of Elvis. And I'm
Sounds
told
kinky.
that Elvis's cousin actually really appreciated that moment because they did actually used to play a game like that.
I did it all with my mind.
Hi, I wanted to ask Kevin about playing Nixon after coming off of Richard III and Frank Underwood. I was wondering, are you drawn to these dark Machiavellian figures of power, and are you trying to sort of get to the bottom of that character type at this stage in your career?
Well, I actually, even though I suppose in hindsight and certainly knowing what happened to Richard Nixon with Watergate, you could put him in that category. But what was interesting to me about this Nixon is that he's not saddled by Watergate. And in fact, he hadn't even started taping in the White House and wouldn't for another year and a half or so. So this wasn't for me exploring a kind of dark Machiavellian figure. There are elements to his paranoia, elements to his the sense that something was always fucked up or wrong or people were screwing up or whatever, that was interesting. But I actually think that the conversation and how it shapes itself out and how Elvis provides for Nixon this sort of conversation in which they have a seemingly brilliantly played by Michael in terms of the giving him what he wants and what he wants to hear, but a conversation that I think Nixon didn't expect. And so for me, a different kind of Nixon from the two other figures that you mentioned.
Following your answer, this movie behind the comedy surface has also, I think, a very melancholic side, because to me, it talks about maybe two very important men, a little bit out of their time. How did you work all together in order to find the balance between comedy and sad, melancholic side?
Drinking. I find drinking really helps.
I mean, yeah, I have to give Liza a lot of the credit for that. But like I said, Jerry kind of gave us our marching orders in the beginning. He's like, I don't want this to be silly, you know. And both of these figures, I think, merit attention and respect. There's so much already in the popular culture, the kind of the mocking caricature of these two people. It's like, why add to that? You know, life's too short, and it's such an amazing opportunity because on the one hand, this is a real event, and on the other hand, it's an imaginary event, and you don't get that opportunity very often. It doesn't, honestly, when I say it out loud, it doesn't even make any sense, but it's the truth. Yeah, but I think, I kind of think that's how we both work. I think everybody in the cast worked this. You know, Alex was incredibly devoted to Jerry, spent a lot of time with Jerry, and was very interested in capturing Jerry's point of view in the story. And Johnny and Colin, everybody showed up to work, even the day players, just had a respect for it. You know, the humor is inherent in it. The humor you don't have to go looking for, really. It's kind of there. But
There's actually not even really jokes in it.
Yeah.
Like there is, I think we all acknowledge that there is a comedy to the situation, but there were like 2 jokes written in the script, and like half the time when we would get to them, you guys would refuse to say them because you were like, this isn't a joke movie. You know?
And it was very awkward when we shot the scene in the airport, which I love this scene, but when we finally came face to face with an actual Elvis impersonator, it was very jarring, I think, for all of us, because it was pretty deep into the shoot. Mm-hmm. And, you know, Joe was involved in the writing of the screenplay, and he's definitely a huge fan of Elvis. But I remember that day being like, oh, thank God we're not doing that, because that would get old fast.
That was actually an amazing day because Jerry, who I play, was on set, and he was so devastated and upset about how his best friend had been betrayed for so many years, and it was kudos to Michael coming on this and playing. Well, Michael's, as we all know, is an incredible actor, but to come on and play the real Elvis, you know, a man that has had trouble throughout his life and was in a certain place in that time, and not bring a kind of comical element that we've seen in Elvis Meets Nixon or whatever. These people have an impression of this man, you know, and I think that impression that these people have is because this man was so charismatic and so charming and had this charisma that exuded who he was. And there's an amazing scene that we had where you guys saw the movie where Elvis talks about putting on these layers that kind of he's a different person when he goes out into the public. And I think what's great about this movie, even with Nixon as well, is you see two very real men that are perceived in the public as two very charismatic men who have power in two different elements. And that coming together and seeing that is quite spectacular.
Hey guys, Art here. Congratulations, wonderful, wonderful film, and each and every one of you bring the characters to life so beautifully. It's just amazing. And all of you are wonderful actors, but Liza does a wonderful job. My question was, as actor, these are real, and we can go either way. These are real characters. What was the most difficult part for you personally to bring your character to life? And one thing which Liza has mentioned that Kevin, you signed on because Michael was on, and then the rest of the cast flew in, attracted to other wonderful actors. What is the most memorable moment from this filming that with another actor? Because you joined on for that actor. What is that most memorable moment? So the most difficult thing about your part and most memorable moment.
We'll start over here on the left.
Yeah, well, I mean, really, the chance to work with everybody at this table was really sort of the big one for me. Just the ability, you know, at this stage of my career, I always want to be able to be in a room where I know I'm going to be entertained and challenged. And when that room happens to be the Oval Office and you have guys like these and women like these, people like these, you sort of jump at that opportunity. I didn't really worry too much about trying to impersonate Bud Crow, but there were 2 days that really stick out in my mind. One was when I was told, "Hey, Bud Crow's coming to set. He wants to meet you," and I just went, "Oh, okay, great. Hope he likes it." I was petrified actually meeting the guy, but Bud turned out to be a very, very kind man who really enjoyed himself. He had a really good time. My favorite part was shooting. Well, there were a bunch. The first day working with Kevin and seeing what he was really doing was really that was a fun one, because it was all of us sitting down reciting about 7 pages of dialogue.
Jumped right in.
It just jumped right in. Yeah, jumped right in. So that was a fun one. But the other one was getting to sit down with Michael as Elvis and explaining the protocol of meeting the president. And he had this one, I'm not sure if it's in the movie, because I actually haven't seen it yet.
Can't wait to show you.
Yeah, I know. But he did this
If you're
one.
not busy, we're showing it tonight.
Okay, yeah, no, I'm planning on being there.
Okay.
But he had a one improv that absolutely just slayed me, where talking about don't drink the president's Dr. Pepper. He says, if you want a soda, I can get you some, I can get you a Coke. The line was, oh, I'm more of a Pepsi man, but he came up with an improv. He says, I'm more of a Mountain Valley spring water. It's bottled at the source. And just the fact that he said that, because I've read the bottled at the source underneath every time, the fact that he went that deep in detail, like, oh, I prefer this water because it's bottled at the source, it just made me laugh.
That's what he drank.
Yeah,
That's what he
no, I
drank.
know.
Mountain Valley spring water.
That one really stuck out for me as one of my highlights.
Thanks.
This question is for Kevin Spacey. In terms of immersing yourself in this very secretive and mysterious character, even though he wasn't secretive yet, but it was in his personality, in order to relate to him, how do you feel what you are and are not like Nixon?
Well, it's, it's a really interesting thing, to always play any character and try to both relate to that character in terms of what qualities are ones that I understand. I mean, even if somebody does things that I would never do, or behaves in ways that I would never behave, or maybe behaves in ways I have behaved, there's always this interesting thing. It's like you mentioned being a detective. It's the way I feel about acting. It's that we are given clues by a writer or by someone's essence or persona, and it's our job to try to figure out which of those clues are true, which of those clues we decide to follow, and which of those clues we think are red herrings, or only the way another character thinks of that character. I mean, so I guess it's the reason why it's interesting, this kind of a role, where we have had many actors in the past play Richard Nixon in different forms and different kinds of styles, or why we love going and seeing Shakespeare or seeing, Michael's doing Long Day's Journey into Night. How many incredible actors have taken on those roles in that play? There's something really incredible. Yeah, there's something so incredible about watching what someone else does with a role that we know. The Hamlets or the Henry V's or the Othellos or the Cleopatras that we've seen on stage. There's something really interesting about the way each individual actor approaches stuff, and some of that stuff is entirely a part of our process that I'm not so eager to talk about. These are investigations that you have to do, and sometimes you walk away from playing somebody and you think, wow, that was as far from my own experience as I can possibly be, and sometimes you walk away thinking, wow, there are qualities in that character I didn't realize I had. And those can be both interesting and uncomfortable, and the journey that we go on as actors is an interesting one and sometimes a revealing one.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you all very much.